I'd also like to echo the Governor of the Bank of Canada, who said this was a moment for us to enjoy. Canada is the first G7 country where interest rates have been lowered. Our economic plan is working.
Taking credit for the cut, that's Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland this week celebrating the Bank of Canada's interest rate cut and praising her government's fiscal policy for helping, quote, create the economic conditions for the central bank to lower its rate. The bank did cut its key lending rate for the first time in 4 years this week by 25 basis points. After nearly a year stuck at 5%, the rate is now at 4.75%. So is the rate cut an inflection point that Liberals can and should celebrate? And what does it mean for the opposition? Our Sunday strategy session is here. Kathleen Monk is a former NDP strategist and Director of Communications to the late Jack Layton. Corey tonight was Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And Scott Reid is former Communications Director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hello, everybody. Happy interest rate cut week. Scott, I'll start with you. What was your initial reaction to the way in which the Finance Minister framed the cut for Canadians?
I thought it was extremely helpful because I thought what they might be able to do is to take videotape of that conversation, put it into National Caucus and do a TED Talk on how this is the way to exactly not communicate where we are in the economy and what our economic message to Canadians is. It was really frustrating because it's so tone deaf. Look, there are three things they've got to do in this situation. One, do not take credit, give credit. That means give credit to Canadians. Say, listen, it's because Canadians have been working hard, sticking with the plan, and we're starting to see signs of hope. We're starting to turn the corner. This interest rate cut means that there are better times and better opportunities ahead. Second, talk about the fact that their plan going forward is focused on making sure the Canadians are the beneficiaries of an improving outlook. Don't take credit. Don't talk about the past. Talk instead about the future. And then the third thing, of course, is contrast it with the Conservative plan. Say now what people have to think about is, do you want to continue to make momentum? Or do you want to stop and take their approach and then detail their approach in the most heinous, villainous, and satanic terms possible? Obviously, this is politics. But standing up and saying, whoa, I'm spiking the football. Whoops, we're not actually in the end zone. Very bad communications.
It may be an odd observation, Corey, but it felt almost personal. And I sort of have observed on many instances, the finance minister get the question, like, what do you mean you're fiscally responsible? And she sort of has consistently seemed exacerbated that the question is even being posed, because I think she really does believe that she was setting the terms for a rate cut like this to happen. And it felt like she was like, finally, look, everybody, you can see. So I sort of do understand it from that perspective, but from a strategic perspective, what are your thoughts on what Scott's saying?
Well, it's hard to disagree with anything that Scott just said. Like, I think that's the calm, ABCs in terms of, what it is you want to do. It's empathy forward. It's receiver oriented communications, all the ways that you can talk about that, which, but I think Scott laid it out fairly well. And there's a deeper thing that governments late in their life can kind of get into, which is that they're looking for a thank you card from the public for the work that they're doing, and I feel like underappreciated and underloved, and that people should really think about all the good work that they're doing and give them credit for all the things that they've done that are positive in the world, and and that's just not the way that works. Politics is not a job where you're going to get a lot of thank you cards. However, if you can't lay out a plan that is like forward looking and do the things that Scott just talked about, you can get a pink slip, not a thank you card, and I think that's what's coming their way imminently.
If they were to switch gears, Kathleen, and sort of do what Scott is saying and focus more on like what we're going to do with the future, what is the best message from your perspective they can try and land?
Yeah, I think they've made an error this week with their kind of almost popping up a mission accomplished banner. I mean, that is a real mistake because people are still feeling a lot of pain, right? We see, high shelter costs, high grocery store. People are afraid to go to the grocery store, right? Take a vacation. And I think that that's a real challenge that if as Scott said, the Liberals are tone deaf to that, they're going to make a mistake. So we can see all the parties doing a different strategy, right? So that's the Liberals' mission accomplished, or almost there. The Conservatives, of course, are actually dismissing the cut altogether, saying it doesn't mean anything. Canada's still broken and you're still poor and life is miserable. And Democrats are saying something different. You know, they're saying you still need help. That's why you hire MPs every 4 years or so. That's what the government's supposed to do. It's supposed to help its citizens. And so we're working on policies to do that. But in terms of the Liberals, to your question of how they can pivot and what they can do, I think they need to double down on we need to do more. That it hasn't been their fiscal policies that have gotten us to where they are, and that Canadians still need help. We're at, what, 20-year highs in terms of grocery prices. Wages still haven't kept up with inflation. People are still hurting. The economy, the labor stats were just out late last week too, and there is growing unemployment, especially with that cohort of new graduates, and particularly young women are having trouble in the labor market. They need to start addressing that and starting helping Canadians more largely with some of the fiscal policy measures that they can work on, not monetary.
Just picking up on Kathleen's point about the opposition as well, Scott, when we talked about this on radio the day of the rate cut, your warning to the Conservatives was basically don't look to be too negative on this, like acknowledge that it could be, at least psychologically an inflection point. What's your assessment of what they did do?
I think it was a real mistake to dismiss the interest rate cut as small change. I think is misreading the room. Look, at the problem the Liberals have is that they want to celebrate this as a vindication of all that they've done and ask Canadians to reward them. Then the risk for the Conservatives is that they appear to be cheering bad news and hoping that bad news will sustain itself. They can't be in that position. They should be welcoming the interest rate cut and talking about how that is a credit to Canadians, not a credit to the government. And I just think it's a huge mistake for them to ever put themselves in a position where it looks like they are praying for rain. You don't want to do that. And frankly, they don't need to do that. They can still pound this government on economic matters without trying to make it sound as though they dismiss every piece of positive economic news.
Corey, your sense of that?
Well, as a farm kid, rain was always good news, Scott. So, look, I gonna, at the risk of agreeing too much with my friend Scott, I agree with that as well. The other thing I would point out is that, while inflation has come down, now interest rates have turned the corner. That is good news. And, good news is good news when you're government, right? So we're kind of, we shouldn't lose sight of that. But we've had probably prices up about 20 points, if you stack up all the inflation, and wages up maybe 2 or 3 points. So people are still really hurting, and they're going to be hurting for a while. And if you renegotiate your mortgage at these higher rates, you're living with that for 3, 4, 5 years, depending on how long you did that. So I don't think any of the pressure on the government on this stuff is going to go away anytime soon. But if I were the Conservatives, I would be saying small step in the right direction.
Kathleen, last word to you on that. I think both you and Corey touch on the point that, even if you just zero in on housing, the housing correction that is essentially necessary to restore affordability is years and years away. And most economists say not until the end of this decade, best case scenario. I think the juxtaposition of that, even as interest rates come down, would have provided more than enough fodder for the Conservatives.
Yeah, and I think that people are aware now, and the bank governor has said that basically interest rates are not going to get back down to the low rates they were before. So even if they drop another point, say over the course of the next 18 months, it's not going to give the relief that they had, back in 2019 or 2020 or earlier when they were signing up for those mortgages. So I think what's important going forward, really for all parties, but particularly for the Liberals, is to hope for some kind of psychological impact. The economy is not just, not just numbers and data points, right? It is how people feel about the economy. If they can actually take that vacation, if they can go, to the grocery store and not really look at every single price, and if people have that psychological uplift, because they're feeling better and that affordability crisis recedes in their memory, then things potentially could look better for the governing Liberals if people aren't voting exclusively on that issue in the next election.
I cannot even imagine going to the grocery store and not caring about the prices.
Right?
It seems far off. Okay, I got to leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Scott Reed, Corey Tenike, and Kathleen Monk, our Sunday strategy session.